All right, Shep. Glad to have you this morning. Hopefully, you've had a good morning so far.
Yeah, I have.
Excellent. So, what I have in store for us today is going to be a lesson on how to more critically listen to music. Now, hopefully, that word critically isn't too scary or intimidating. Is it's not going to be very difficult what we're doing. Just want to kind of give you a different way of listening to music that can kind of wrap your head around some of these kind of more musician-like terms and way of conceptualizing what we're hearing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, when you listen to music, are you familiar with the idea of what the beat is that you're hearing?
Yes.
Awesome. And so, there are a lot of different ways we could define the beat. The beat is basically the pulse or the heartbeat of the song. And that's typically what you would just be kind of nodding your head to or tapping your foot to as you listen to a piece of music. So I'm sure you've experienced that before.
Yeah.
So when you're listening to music and you're kind of feeling that beat, do you ever get into the mindset of trying to figure out how much time is passing as you're listening to that? Or do you just kind of like let it happen?
Like, not really. Yeah, I just kind of let it happen.
And that's great. I would say I do that also. And I think part of enjoying music is just being able to listen to it and enjoy it. But taking that a step further, as a musician that oftentimes needs to end up playing along with the music, I've had to figure out kind of quick ways and kind of recipes of how to organize that in my head so that if I needed to play along with it, I could figure out kind of what's happening in the music as quickly as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great. So to start out, I'm going to play a little bit of this music for you. And the first thing we're going to do is going to be real simple. All I want to do is just kind of nod our heads along with the music to kind of identify where that beat is happening. And this song is a relatively slow lullaby. And so that slow tempo should be pretty easy for us to hear the beat. So I'm just going to play a little bit of it. And if you could just nod along with me. The timing is going to be a little bit different because of the computer lag, but I'll be able to see that you're nodding along with the beats. And it also give us an opportunity to make sure you can hear what I'm playing. So here we go, nodding along.
1, 2, 3, 4. Rockin my baby in a soft summer breeze. Rockin my baby in a soft summer breeze.
So, did you have any problem identifying the beats with that?
Not really, no.
Yeah, and pretty straightforward, especially with that count off. The count off in the beginning is exactly what the beat was. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you just keep nodding along with that, and you're boom, good shape. Now, in what we listen to, as you're nodding along, what I like to do immediately as soon as I start listening to the piece is trying to count along with it. Are you familiar with counting in music?
Yeah.
And so I'm not, by listening to the music, you can oftentimes hear how things are organized a little bit. And this piece, like many of the pieces we've listened to, the beats are kind of grouped into groups of 4.
Yeah.
And if you've ever played music in an organized fashion before, you've probably run into common time, which is 4/4. And so as we're nodding along with that, we could be counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and so on. And if we've done that before, I imagine.
Yes.
Excellent. And so when we count the beats like that, we're actually grouping the beats into measures. You familiar with measures?
Yes.
Great. So we're flying along. And then within those measures, the next thing I'm listening for, is there any amount of repetition that kind of groups the measures into bigger parts?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would call those phrases. Is that something you've heard of before?
Yes.
Awesome. You're already way more advanced than a beginner would be, for sure. So you're going to be great at this. So in what we listen to, we're nodding along with the beats. I'm going to have us this time count the measures along. And what we're going to be listening for is anytime we hear that guitar ukulele sound repeating itself.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, can we hear when it's kind of repeating the same cycle of sound?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So this time, as it's playing and we're nodding our heads, I want us to just use our fingers and we're going to count along with it how many measures we hear.
Okay. Yeah.
So right after the count off, when the guitar starts playing, that's going to be the beginning of measure 1. And we're just going to count along with that and count through some measures together.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to play the exact same chunk we just heard, this time counting along.
1, 2, 3, 4. Rockin' my baby in a soft summer breeze. Rockin' my baby in a soft summer breeze.
Great. Yeah, that was excellent. You were changing right with me, right with the music. So in that, we're nodding along, counting the beats. How many measures did you count just then? What did we get to?
I got to 7 or 6.
Well, yeah, we were about to get to the
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, you're doing great on this. In those 6 measures that we counted, did it sound like the guitar part was repeating itself, or were you hearing a different thing?
Yeah, I heard it repeat like some of the same chords and notes. So yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And so that's what we're trying to identify as we go through this. And then we're going to start grouping these things into a chart, or in other words, a form that if we had to kind of look back at our chart, we would be able to play along with this eventually.
Yeah.
And so right now, we're not going to try to identify what chord it is or anything like that. We're simply trying to figure out how the song is built. And so far, we haven't done, or we haven't heard anything different. And so right now, what I'm going to ask you to do is, as we move forward with the song, listen for when you hear the guitar part changing.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yes.
So one more time listening through. And this is actually good practice as you're listening through the same chunk one more time. I've got 2 assignments for you. You're going to try to decide how many measures it takes for the guitar part to repeat.
Mm-hmm.
So is it repeating every measure? Maybe it's every 2 measures. Maybe if it's every 3 measures. You can see if you can hear that. And then when it gets to something different, I'm going to let it play along a little bit more. Just raise your hand when you hear a different part.
Okay.
When you hear the guitar do something that sounds different. So here we are from the top again. And we'll see if we can figure out how long it takes to repeat.
1, 2, 3, 4. Rockin' my baby in a soft summer breeze. Rockin' my baby in a soft summer breeze. Rockin' my baby, let my baby rock me. listen to locust tree, each little locust seed wants to find its way, grow into a great locust tree someday.
All right. So there was a lot of stuff happening within that chunk. So I saw your hand go up when you heard the guitar do something different. And that was a pretty obvious change, right?
Yeah.
So from the repetition, boom, there's something different. Now I kept playing a little bit because I wanted to let it get back to, did you hear at the very end of what we listened to, it going back to the original thing?
Yeah.
That change back to it?
Yes.
Great. So in the beginning part of that listening, were you able to figure out how many measures it took for the cycle to repeat, for the guitar to repeat?
It sounded like 2 measures.
You're exactly right. And so the phrase length of most of this song is happening in 2-bar phrases. And so now we've listened to enough of the song that I want to start mapping things out a little bit, which will end up being kind of getting us to what will look like a chart. So you've got a whiteboard behind you there, and I'm going to share with you my digital whiteboard. And so what I want you to try to do there, just up in the top left corner, and don't let this be very big because there's going to have to be quite a few different things that we need to add to it. And if I can find my whiteboard menu here. So I don't want to talk or worry about chords right now. So the first thing we heard, I'm just going to call A.
Okay.
And so right at the top there, you can write A. And like we were discussing, you mentioned that you heard there was a 2-measure repeating guitar part, right?
Yes.
And you don't need to write that. I'm just listing that for reference for us. And so the idea here is every time we hear those 2 measures, I'm going to put another A.
Okay.
So do you remember how many times we heard that before the music changed?
I think it was 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. 3 times, which would total 6 measures, right?
Yeah.
So then the next thing we heard, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to call B. So far we have 3 A's, and then it changes to a B. Now, on the first listen, because that was the first time we heard this next part, you may not have gotten everything that was happening from there. Do you remember how many measures it took for us to get back to that repeat of the guitar part?
I did not. Maybe 4.
Yeah, that's a great guess. But oftentimes, the first time I hear a part, I'm not entirely sure. So it's not a bad idea to go back to listen to it.
Yeah.
So we're going to go back and listen to that second part where it goes to the B. And now we're going to listen to, is that B 2 measures? Does that repeat twice? Or is it slightly different the second time we hear it? So I'm going to take it back and we're going to listen to that. Let me make sure you can still hear what's happening. And here we go.
In a soft summer breeze, rockin' my baby, let my
I'm going to count
baby
along with what you
rock
mentioned.
me.
Here's the first beat.
listen to locust tree. Each little locust seed
Now, is this the same?
wants to find its way,
Back to the
grow
beginning.
into a great locust tree someday.
So, what do you think?
I think it would be AAABCA.
I totally agree. Yeah, because the second time, it was a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
So just like you said, after your B, let's do another C, back to an A. You are rocking and rolling, my friend. Very nice. So with that mentality, you can listen through a tune. And now that we have that kind of process in place, as we continue to listen to it, we probably won't need to go back and do the same kind of double listening. And eventually, because songs are so built around repetition, it's quite possible that we've already heard all of the parts of the song, and everything else from here out is going to be some type of repetition. And by counting the beats and grouping them into the phrases and the measures in the way that you just did, you probably listen to the rest of the song and get that really dialed in from there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let the tune keep rolling a little bit, and then I'll stop it every so often and let you fill in the rest of the form. Sound good?
Yeah.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a repeat, and then we'll keep going from where we were. So this is the last A that you just wrote down.
Okay.
Here's the next part.
Planets round the sun, like leaves in the arm. Rocking little babies, giving life through her warm. The stars in the galaxy, I like babies, you see. Sisters and brothers, one big family, rocking little babies in a soft summer breeze.
All right. So I let that play for quite a bit. Now, in that part that we just listened to, some of the lyrics changed, but did you hear the same format?
Yes, I did.
And so, yeah, in fact, it repeated that exact same form you have written up on the board.
Yeah.
So let's go. Let's see, do we have enough room? Yeah, let's go below that. Let me throw my whiteboard back up for you. So this is what we had so far, correct?
Yeah.
Well, actually, yours is a little bit ahead of mine. So you've got your B, C, and then A again.
Yeah.
So now let's continue writing below that. So we had an A without vocals, right? And then we had two more A's with vocals. And then we had another B, C, A, just like we did at the beginning. So now, if we wanted to, we could go ahead and add some notes to this. And so that first A that we wrote in this new section, I'm going to put in parentheses that this is just the guitar melody, which was the same as the intro. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then right here, I'll just mention to myself that lyrics enter.
Mm-hmm.
So, you with me so far?
Yeah.
That was pretty straightforward, pretty easy because you're a rock star. And now I'm just going to let the tune finish out. All right. And then we'll go back and fill in the rest of what we need. So right from where we stopped. The second A from where we stopped. Here's the B again. Here's the C. And that's back to our A. And then the lyrics come back in. So since you're running out of room there, let's jump up to kind of the top right side of the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just right next to your first group there. And let's write the form of what we just heard.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 2 A's, B, C, A. And maybe give your, yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to, at the top of that, you can make a little note to yourself that that was an instrumental. And so maybe you could say guitar only. Beautiful. And then right below that last A, maybe just draw a line there so you know that's when the instrumental stopped. Beautiful. All right, now let's finish the song. You ready?
Yeah.
Brothers, fathers, sons, daughters,
There's
mothers,
another A.
rocking each other in a soft summer breeze, rocking our babies in a soft summer breeze, rocking my baby and let my baby rock me, rocking my baby and let my baby rock me, rocking my baby and let my baby rock me.
And that's the song. So how many times did it change at all after the instrumental?
No, it was all A's.
Okay, how many of those A's were there?
6.
All right, you know what to do. Throw down those 6 A's. And I would like to, on that very last one, the very last A, could you tell that the tempo of the song, the beat kind of slowed down towards the end?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's something in a chart that I would like to remember. So beside that, you could say that last A slows down at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Now, with what you just did, and it took us maybe 20 minutes or so to do that, what you did is charted the entire song.
Yeah.
So now, if we went back and listened to the whole thing, you would be able to know exactly what's coming before it got there. And as a musician, that would allow you to, whatever part you're trying to play, know what's coming up so you can be ready for it, plug it in, and now you're not guessing at all because you've taken the time to chart that out.
Mm-hmm.
And you did that really well. You're already listening very well. And so I'm going to share with you now what that looks like. I charted this out previously. And the next thing, if we were doing this to play along with, it would be useful to be able to have the lyrics go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to share with you what that looks like on the screen there. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And so you see here on the left, I have the exact same thing written down that you had, the A's, B's, and C's.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've also written some other notes in here. So at the beginning, there's an extra A that we didn't write down, and that's the intro that happens at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see I've also filled in the lyrics here so that as I'm listening to the song, I have that lyrical assistance coming in, so everything kind of matches up.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you did, I've got the instrumental written down here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got the last time slows down written in there as well. And that, my friend, is the basic form of the chart.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Any questions about that?
I don't think so.
Excellent. So we're not going to get into detail today with any of the chords. The next step, if we did want to do that, we could get out pretty much any instrument. We could do this on a piano, a guitar, a bass. I know you play trumpet. We could figure this out on trumpet. But the next thing we would do is to go back and figure out with each of those sections what the chords are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I have what that would look like right here with the chords written in as well. But you can see the chords go right along with the different A's, B's, and C's.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
basically, it's just a matter of copying and pasting. Every time there's an A, it's this same chord progression. F for a measure, C for 2 beats, F for 2 beats. Every time it's a B section, it's B flat for 2 beats, F for 2 beats, B flat for 2 beats, F for 2 beats. Every time it's a C section, you get the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because we spent the time first thing through discovering what the form of the song was in terms of those different sections, A, B, and C, now when we go back and plug in the chords, you don't need to listen to the entire song, every single chord. We already know that it follows that certain recipe. So all you need to do is figure out what the chord progression is for the A, figure out what the chord progression is for the B, figure out what the chord progression is for the C. And because there are only those 3 parts, we've already figured out the chords for the entire song.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, can you see how that process, especially if you practiced it quite a bit, how that could lend itself to figuring out songs pretty quickly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You think you could manage that on your own if you really had to? If someone threw a brand new song at you, you could kind of listen to it and kind of figure it out?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And even as a young musician, you may not be able to figure out all of the chords and all of the notes without some assistance. But even just figuring out how it goes through, I think is a valuable tool all on its own.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are there any, great. Are there any terms or ideas that we discussed that you're unfamiliar with, or were you kind of keeping up with all the language that we were using?
I think I knew it pretty good. So. Yeah, I think that was good.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. Well, I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk to you about today, and you charted out the whole tune. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Really nice. You're welcome. Well, let's leave it at that for today. Maybe next time we get together, we can get into a little more detail.
Yes, I'll be good. Thank you.
You're welcome. No problem.
All right, his information is at the bottom in the description, in a link below. Paul Wood